What is the most important thing a parent can leave to their children? Is it money, a house, or is it the lesson of how to be a good person, how to love your family? When my mother passed away, she did not have much money to leave, but I thought she had left my sister and me something much more important, a bond of sisterhood. I learned in a very painful way that sometimes a little bit of money can be enough to destroy that bond forever. This is a story about my sister, and a lesson she learned in a very public courtroom. Do you think that money can change a person? I would love to read your thoughts in the comments. My name is Anna, and this is the story of my mother's will. My older sister Chloe and I were always very different. Chloe was the ambitious one. She was smart and beautiful, and she always wanted a bigger, more exciting life. After college, she moved to a big city, got a high-paying job in business, and married a rich man. She had a glamorous life, a life of fancy parties and expensive vacations. She was very successful. I was the quiet one. I stayed in our small hometown. My dream was not to be rich. My dream was to have a quiet, simple life and to be close to my family. I became a librarian, and for the last 5 years of my mother's life, I was her caregiver. She was sick, and she needed someone. Chloe was always too busy with her important job to visit more than once or twice a year. So I was the one. I cooked her meals, I took her to her doctor's appointments, I read to her in the evenings. It was hard, but I did it for love. She was my mother and my best friend. When she passed away, my heart was broken. A week after the funeral, Chloe and I went to a lawyer's office for the reading of our mother's will. My mother did not have a lot of money. She had her small, simple house and a little bit of savings in the bank. I knew that the will would be simple. My mother loved us both equally. The lawyer read the will. It was just as I expected. It said, "I leave my house and all of my savings to be divided equally between my 2 beloved daughters, Anna and Chloe." It was a fair, simple, and loving final wish. I felt a sad, warm feeling in my heart. But then, my sister Chloe spoke. Her voice was full of a fake, sad emotion. "I am afraid there is a problem," she said to the lawyer. I looked at her, confused. She opened her expensive handbag and took out a large folder full of papers. "You see," she said, "our mother's medical care in her final years was very, very expensive, and I was the one who paid for all of it. I have the receipts here." She showed the lawyer a stack of bills and receipts. The numbers were huge. I was completely shocked. What was she talking about? Our mother's care was not that expensive, and I was the one who managed all the bills. I knew for a fact that my mother's small pension and insurance had paid for almost everything. I had paid for the rest with my own small savings. Chloe had never given us a single dollar. My sister looked at me with her sad, fake eyes. "I am so sorry, Anna," she said. "I paid over $200,000 for her care. The house and the savings are only worth about that much. So, the entire inheritance must come to me to pay back the money I spent. There is nothing left for you. It is a sad situation, but it is the only fair thing to do." I could not believe what I was hearing. She was lying. She had created fake documents. She was using her big city business skills to try and steal our mother's house, our childhood home. She was trying to steal my entire inheritance. The lawyer, a man who did not know our family, said that if she had legal receipts, her claim was a serious one. The matter would have to be settled by a judge. The weeks before our court date were the loneliest of my life. My sister Chloe would not answer my calls. She was a stranger to me now, an enemy. I was so sad and so scared. She had a team of expensive big city lawyers, and I had no money. I had to use a free legal aid lawyer, a kind but very young man who looked as scared as I was. I did not have any fake receipts to show the court. All I had was the truth. So every night after work, I sat at my mother's old kitchen table, and I went through her life. I collected all her old papers. I found all the small, real documents of her last 5 years. Insurance papers that showed her medical care was paid for. Bank statements that showed the money from her pension paying the bills. I found the little notebook where I wrote down every doctor's appointment, every medicine she had to take. It was a sad, painful process. It was like living through her illness all over again. But I had to do it. I had to fight for my mother's memory. The day we went to court, I was so terrified. The courtroom was a big, intimidating place. Chloe was there, with her 2 expensive lawyers. She was wearing a beautiful black suit, and she looked so confident, so powerful. She looked at me, her little sister, with a cold, pitying look. She was so sure she was going to win. Her lawyer went first. He was a very good actor. He told a story about a wonderful, successful daughter, Chloe, who had sacrificed so much to pay for her mother's care. He showed the judge the big, thick folder of receipts and bills. The numbers were so large. It looked so professional, so convincing. When he was finished, the judge, a wise-looking older woman, looked at me. It felt like she was looking right into my heart. "And Ms. Davis," she said, "what do you have to say?" My young lawyer stood up and said, "Your Honor, my client will speak for herself." I walked to the front of the courtroom, my hands shaking. I was not holding a fancy folder. I was just holding my mother's old shoebox, the one where she kept all her important papers. "Your Honor," I began, my voice a small, trembling whisper. "My sister has shown you a folder of big, expensive receipts. I do not have receipts like that, but I have my own kind of proof." I opened the shoebox. "This is the notebook where I wrote down every time my mother was in pain," I said, my voice getting stronger. "These are the bank statements that show her own small pension paying for her own medicine. This is a letter from her doctor, thanking me for being a good, attentive caregiver. And these are my own pay stubs, showing the hours I did not work, the money I did not earn, because I was at the hospital with her." I looked at my sister. "My sister says she paid for my mother's care, but she was not there. I was there. I was there every single day for 5 years. My sacrifice was not of money. It was of time. It was of my own life, and I did it for love." The judge was quiet for a long time. She looked at my simple, honest shoebox. Then she looked at Chloe's big, impressive folder. She picked up one of Chloe's receipts. "Ms. Adams," the judge said to my sister, "this is a very large bill for a private nurse for 24 hours a day. But the hospital records, which I have here, show that your mother was in the hospital for that entire week. Why would she need a private nurse at home when she was not at home?" Chloe's confident face started to crumble. She could not answer. She just stammered, I don't remember." The judge looked at her, and her eyes were not kind anymore. They were sharp, and they were full of a cold disappointment. "I see," the judge said. She looked at all of Chloe's papers, and then she looked at Chloe. "Ma'am," the judge said, her voice full of a quiet, powerful anger. "You came into this courtroom with a story about money. Your sister came into this courtroom with a story about love. It is very clear to me which story is true. It is very clear to me who was really there for your mother. A person's character is the true inheritance. And it seems your mother gave all of her good character to only one of her daughters." The judge looked at me, and she smiled a small, kind smile. And then she looked back at my sister. "Your claim is dismissed, and I suggest you think very hard about the crime of creating false documents in a court of law." The judge's final words were like a heavy stone dropping into a silent pool. The sound of her gavel was the sound of the end. My sister, Chloe, just sat at her table, her face completely white. Her expensive lawyers were quietly and quickly packing their briefcases. They did not look at her. They had lost. She had lost. I was crying, but they were tears of relief, tears of a deep and exhausted justice. I had not won a house. I had won my mother's honor. I walked out of the courtroom, and in the long, empty hallway, she was standing there, waiting for me. Her face was not sad anymore. It was a tight, ugly mask of anger. "Are you happy now?" she hissed, her voice a low, poison whisper. "You have ruined everything. You have humiliated me. You have destroyed our family." I looked at my sister, at this beautiful, successful, and now very ugly woman. And for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of her. I did not feel small. I just felt a deep and very sad pity for her. "I did not do this, Chloe," I said, and my voice was calm. "You did. You lied. You tried to steal our mother's home. You are the one who has destroyed everything, not me." I did not wait for her to answer. I just turned and I walked away. I left her standing alone in the cold gray hallway of the courthouse. I went home, to my mother's house, to our house. It was so quiet and empty, but it was not sad anymore. It was a place of peace. The fight was over. For the next few weeks, I did not think about my sister. I did not think about the money. I just focused on the house. I opened all the windows to let the fresh air in. I cleaned every room. I went out into the small, messy garden, and I started to pull out the weeds. I was not just cleaning a house. I was cleaning my own heart. I was preparing for a new, quiet, and peaceful life. The lawyer had told me that the legal process to divide the house would take a few months. I would probably have to sell it, and then I would get my half of the money. I was okay with that. I was ready to start a new chapter. But about a month after our day in court, I received a large, official-looking envelope in the mail. It was from a law firm. My heart sank. What now? Was Chloe trying to fight me again? My hands were shaking as I opened it, but it was not a letter about a new court case. It was a legal document, a deed. It said that my sister, Chloe Adams, was giving her entire half of our mother's house, and all of her half of the savings, to me. I was now the one and only owner of everything. I was completely shocked. I did not understand. At the bottom of the legal papers, there was a small, simple, handwritten note. It was not a long letter. It was just 3 words, in my sister's familiar, beautiful handwriting. It just said, "I am so sorry." I sat in the quiet of my mother's kitchen, holding the paper that gave me her whole house, and the small, sad note from the sister I had lost. I did not feel like a winner. I just felt a deep and very lonely sadness. For many months, I lived alone in my mother's quiet house. I worked in her garden. I planted new flowers. I painted the walls a fresh, happy color. The house started to feel like a home again. But it was a lonely home. I had won the house. I had won the fight. But I had lost my sister. Her 3-word note, "I am so sorry," was a sad ghost that lived with me. It was an apology, but it was also a goodbye. I knew that I could not live with that sad silence forever. I loved my mother's house, but a house is just a building. A family is what makes a home. And my family was broken. One day, I made a decision. I got in my car, and I drove to the big city. I drove to my sister's address. I did not know what I was going to say. I just knew that I had to see her. I stood in front of her expensive apartment building, my heart pounding. I almost turned around and went home, but then I thought of my mother and the love she had for both of us. And I found my courage. I went up to her apartment, and I knocked on the door. Chloe opened the door. She was so shocked to see me. She looked different. The old, confident, powerful light in her eyes was gone. She just looked tired, and so very sad. "Anna," she whispered, "what are you doing here?" I came to ask you a question, I said. Why did you give me the house, Chloe? Tears started to fall from her eyes. She let me in, and she told me everything. She told me that the judge's words in the courtroom had broken her. The words, "Your mother gave all of her good character to only one of her daughters," had played in her mind over and over again. She said she went home to her big, fancy life, and she finally saw that it was all empty. She had spent her whole life trying to be successful, to be rich, and in the process, she had become a person her mother would be ashamed of. I was so full of shame, she cried. I felt like I did not deserve to be her daughter. Giving you the house was the only thing I could do. It was my punishment. It was my way of saying sorry. I looked at my sister, my beautiful, successful, and completely broken sister, and I did not see the woman who had tried to steal from me. I saw the little girl I had grown up with, the girl who had a big heart before the world taught her to love money more. I went to her, and I put my arms around her. The house is not what I want, Chloe, I whispered. Not without you. Mom did not leave us a house. She left us each other, and that is the only inheritance that really matters. That was a year ago. My sister and I are still very different, but our bond is slowly healing. She sold her big, empty apartment in the city. She has a smaller, simpler life now, and she comes home once a month. We work in our mother's garden together. We are learning how to be sisters again. The legal papers said I was the winner. But I learned that in a fight with your family, there are no real winners. The only victory is in finding a way back to each other. The only victory is forgiveness. If this story about sisterhood and forgiveness was meaningful to you, please give this video a like. Do you believe it is always possible to forgive a family member? Share your thoughtful opinions in the comments. For more emotional English stories about the power of family, please be sure to follow our channel.